Before we dive in, viewer discretion is advised. This content is for entertainment purposes.
What happens when Hollywood's biggest action star sits down with one of daytime television's most controversial hosts, and everything goes completely off the rails? The tension in Studio 1A was thick enough to cut with a knife, as Vin Diesel settled into the iconic red chair across from Joy Behar, expecting a routine promotional interview for his latest blockbuster. What he got instead was an ambush that would leave the entire View panel speechless and force producers to make an unprecedented decision. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below, because this story will blow your mind. The morning started like any other at The View. Joy Behar had arrived early, her usual coffee in hand, reviewing her notes for what was supposed to be a straightforward celebrity interview. Vin Diesel was scheduled to discuss his upcoming action thriller and his family life, typical fare for the morning show circuit. But something was different about Joy's demeanor that morning. Her assistant noticed she seemed more agitated than usual, constantly checking her phone and muttering under her breath about Hollywood phonies and their carefully crafted public personas. As the show's opening theme music faded and the cameras focused on the panel, Joy's co-hosts exchanged their usual pleasantries with the studio audience. Whoopi Goldberg welcomed viewers with her characteristic warmth, while the other hosts settled into their roles for what they assumed would be another routine episode. The energy was light, conversational. The kind of atmosphere that had made The View a staple of morning television for over 2 decades. When it came time to introduce their guest, Joy's voice carried an edge that the regular viewers might have missed, but the production crew definitely noticed. Our next guest is Vin Diesel, here to talk about his new movie and supposedly his real life, though we'll see about that, she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. The other hosts glanced at each other, sensing something was off but unable to pinpoint exactly what had shifted in the studio's atmosphere. Vin Diesel walked onto the set with his trademark confident stride, flashing his million-dollar smile at the audience, who erupted in enthusiastic applause. He was dressed casually but stylishly, embodying the accessible movie star persona that had made him a fan favorite across multiple generations. As he settled into the guest chair, he extended his hand toward Joy with genuine warmth, completely unaware of the storm that was about to unleash. "Thanks for having me on the show, Joy. It's always great to be here with you ladies," Vin said, his voice carrying that familiar gravelly tone that had become synonymous with his on-screen presence. He leaned back comfortably, clearly expecting the kind of friendly banter that characterized most morning show appearances. The studio audience was still buzzing with excitement, phones out to capture the moment their favorite action hero graced their television screens. Joy's response was immediate and cutting. Well, look who decided to grace us with his presence. Tell me, Vin, do you actually believe all the tough guy nonsense you sell to your fans? Or is that just another performance for the cameras? The words hit the air like a slap, causing an immediate shift in the studio's energy. The audience's excited chatter died down to confused murmurs, and Vin's friendly expression faltered for just a moment before he tried to recover. "I'm sorry, what exactly are you getting at here?" Vin asked, his voice maintaining its composure, but his body language stiffening noticeably. He glanced toward Whoopi and the other hosts, clearly hoping for some clarification, or perhaps rescue from what was quickly becoming an uncomfortable situation. The cameras captured every micro-expression, every subtle shift in posture, as the interview took its unexpected turn. Joy leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she pressed her attack. "You've built your entire career on this family man, tough guy image, but we all know it's just Hollywood smoke and mirrors. Tell us what you're really like when the cameras aren't rolling and you don't have a script to follow." Her voice carried a sharpness that made several audience members shift uncomfortably in their seats. The accusation hung in the air like a challenge, and Vin's jaw tightened visibly. "Listen, Joy. I came here to talk about my work and maybe share some stories with your audience. I'm not sure what kind of interview you think this is, but I'm the same person. Whether the cameras are on or off. That's not an act. That's just who I am." His response was measured but firm, showing the first signs that Hollywood's laid-back action star wasn't going to simply roll over in the face of unexpected hostility. "Oh please, spare me the authentic act," Joy shot back, her voice rising slightly. "Do you really think we're all just going to sit here and pretend that your whole persona isn't carefully manufactured by publicists and image consultants? The family values, the brotherhood with your co-stars, the whole humble guy from New York thing. It's all just marketing, isn't it?" The studio had fallen completely silent, except for the low hum of cameras and equipment. Whoopi Goldberg looked like she wanted to intervene but seemed frozen by the rapid escalation of what was supposed to be a light promotional segment. The other hosts exchanged worried glances, clearly unprepared for this level of confrontation during what should have been a feel-good celebrity interview. Vin's famous composure was beginning to crack as he leaned forward in his chair, his voice taking on a defensive edge. "You know what, Joy? I don't know what your problem is today, but I didn't come here to be attacked by someone who's made a career out of stirring up controversy for ratings. Maybe you should look in the mirror before you start questioning other people's authenticity." The words were delivered with controlled intensity, but everyone in the studio could feel the temperature rising. "There it is," Joy exclaimed, pointing an accusatory finger across the table. "The real Vin Diesel, everyone. The moment someone challenges him, out comes the arrogance and the defensiveness. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't handle anyone questioning your carefully constructed image, can you?" Joy's accusatory finger remained pointed at Vin, as the silence stretched uncomfortably across the studio. The audience sat frozen, unsure whether they were witnessing television history or simply watching a career implode in real time. Vin stared back at his host, his famous calm exterior finally beginning to show genuine cracks under the relentless assault on his character. "You want to know what I can't handle, Joy?" Vin said, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet tone that somehow carried more weight than any shout. "I can't handle sitting across from someone who's built her entire career on tearing other people down and having her lecture me about authenticity. You want to talk about manufactured personas? Let's talk about the angry, bitter host who hides behind controversy because she's got nothing else to offer." The words hit their target with surgical precision. Joy's face flushed red, but instead of backing down, she doubled down on her attack. "How dare you sit there and try to turn this around on me? I've been in this business longer than you've been pretending to be tough on movie screens. At least I don't hide behind some fake family values routine while living a completely different life behind closed doors. What exactly are you implying here?" Vin asked, his hands gripping the arms of his chair so tightly, his knuckles were turning white. The camera operators moved in closer, sensing they were capturing something unprecedented. "Because if you've got something specific to say about my family or my personal life, then say it. Otherwise, stop hiding behind vague accusations and innuendo." Whoopi finally found her voice, attempting to steer the conversation back toward safer territory. "Maybe we should take a step back here and—" she began. But Joy cut her off with a sharp wave of her hand. "Never." Taking her eyes off Vin. "Don't even think about protecting him, Whoopi. This is exactly the problem with this industry. Everyone's so afraid to ask the real questions, to challenge these manufactured celebrities when they come on our show peddling their fake sincerity." Joy's voice was rising now, her composure completely abandoned as she leaned forward aggressively. "Tell me, Vin, how does it feel to know that your entire fan base is built on a lie? That all these people who look up to you as some kind of role model are worshipping a complete fabrication?" The accusation was so personal, so cutting, that even the camera operators seemed to recoil slightly. Vin sat back in his chair, his jaw working silently for a moment as he processed what had just been said to him on national television. When he finally spoke, his voice was controlled but carried an unmistakable undercurrent of anger. "You know what, Joy? You're absolutely right about one thing. This conversation is exactly what's wrong with this industry. But it's not because I'm fake or manufactured. It's because people like you have turned every platform into an opportunity to spread negativity and attack anyone who's achieved success. You're sitting there questioning my authenticity while you're being the most inauthentic person I've ever met." "Inauthentic?" Joy practically shrieked, her professional veneer completely shattered now. I'm the most real person on this panel. I say what everyone else is thinking but too afraid to voice. Unlike you, I don't need writers or directors or special effects to make me interesting. This is who I am. Take it or leave it. And this is who you choose to be? Vin responded, gesturing toward her with obvious disgust. A person who attacks guests on your own show? Someone who tries to tear down people you've never even met, just to create drama for your audience? If that's authenticity, then I'll take manufactured any day of the week. The other hosts sat in stunned silence, clearly out of their depth as the confrontation spiraled completely out of control. The studio audience had gone from confused murmurs to absolute silence, as if they were afraid any sound might escalate the situation even further. The tension was so thick that even the usually unflappable production crew seemed rattled. Joy stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. You want to know what I choose to be? I choose to be someone who doesn't bow down to Hollywood pretty boys who think they can come on my show and charm their way through tough questions. I choose to be someone who calls out phonies when I see them, regardless of how many movies they've sold, or how many fans they have. Vin remained seated, but his entire posture changed, becoming more rigid and confrontational. Tough questions? Is that what you call this ambush? You haven't asked me a single legitimate question about anything. You've just spent the last 10 minutes attacking my character, based on nothing but your own prejudices and assumptions. My prejudices? Joy's voice reached a pitch that made several audience members visibly wince. Don't you dare try to make this about me, having some kind of agenda against you personally? This is about holding celebrities accountable for the images they project versus the reality of who they actually are. Accountable for what exactly? Vin shot back, his own voice rising now to match her intensity. For working hard and being successful? For valuing my family and trying to be a positive role model? For not conforming to whatever cynical worldview you think makes for good television? You still haven't told me what specific crime I've committed, other than not being miserable enough for your taste. The confrontation had reached a fever pitch, with both participants now standing and facing each other across the interview space. The cameras captured every angry expression, every gesture, every word of an exchange that had gone so far beyond the bounds of normal television that the control room was in chaos trying to figure out how to handle the situation. The crime of being fake, Joy screamed, pointing at him again with even more venom than before. The crime of selling a lie to millions of people who deserve better than your manufactured authenticity. The crime of sitting there, acting like you're some kind of victim, when you're nothing but another Hollywood fraud who can't handle being called out. Vin took a step closer to the table, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level that somehow carried more menace than any shout. And the crime of being you is inflicting your bitterness and negativity on everyone around you, while pretending it's some kind of public service. At least my so-called fake persona brings joy to people's lives. What does yours bring, except misery and conflict? The studio fell into absolute silence as the weight of that final exchange settled over everyone present. The confrontation had reached a point where something had to give. The absolute silence that followed Vin's devastating response stretched for what felt like an eternity. Joy's face had gone from red to pale as the reality of what he'd just said sank in. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every second of the uncomfortable standoff that was unfolding in front of a live studio audience and millions of viewers at home. Neither host nor guest seemed willing to back down from the precipice they'd reached. Joy's hands trembled slightly as she processed the implication that her life's work amounted to nothing more than spreading misery. For a moment, something flickered across her face that might have been genuine hurt, but it was quickly replaced by a fury, more intense than anything she'd displayed so far. Her voice, when she finally found it, was barely controlled rage. "How dare you stand there and judge my life's work?" she began, her words coming out in a low, dangerous whisper that somehow carried more venom than all her previous shouting. "You have no idea what I've sacrificed to get where I am. What I've had to endure in this industry, as a woman who refuses to play nice and smile pretty for people like you. Vin crossed his arms, his stance unwavering despite the renewed attack. And there it is. The victim card. When all else fails, make it about how hard you've had it, instead of taking responsibility for how you treat people. You want to know what I see when I look at you, Joy? I see someone who's become so bitter about her own struggles that she can't stand to see anyone else find happiness or success. The accusation hit like a physical blow. Joy's composure, which had been hanging by a thread, finally snapped completely. You arrogant, self-righteous piece of garbage, she screamed, her voice breaking with emotion. You think you can come on my show and psychoanalyze me? You think you understand anything about what it takes to survive in this business when you're not some muscle-bound pretty boy that Hollywood decided to make a star? The other hosts looked absolutely horrified. Whoopi made another attempt to intervene, half rising from her chair. But Joy was beyond reason now. The studio audience sat in shocked silence, many covering their mouths in disbelief at what they were witnessing. This had gone far beyond uncomfortable television into genuinely disturbing territory. Survive? Vin repeated, his own anger now matching hers in intensity. Is that what you call this? Surviving by destroying other people? By using your platform to spread hate and negativity? If this is your idea of survival, then maybe you should have found a different career path a long time ago. Don't you tell me about career paths? Joy shrieked, now completely unhinged. I was building my career when you were still bouncing at nightclubs, pretending to be tough. I've earned every single thing I have through hard work and talent, not by flexing my muscles and reading lines someone else wrote for me. The personal attack on his pre-Hollywood career seemed to touch a nerve that even Joy's previous assaults hadn't reached. Vin's jaw tightened, and his voice took on an edge of genuine menace that made several crew members visibly uncomfortable. You want to talk about my past? Fine. Yes. I worked as a bouncer. Yes. I struggled to make it in this industry. But I never used that struggle as an excuse to become a bitter, angry person who takes pleasure in tearing others down. That's the difference between us, Joy. I chose to use my experiences to build something positive. You chose to become everything wrong with this business. Joy's face contorted with rage as she pointed an accusatory finger at him again, this time shaking with fury. Everything wrong with this business? I'm everything wrong with this business? Not the fake tough guys who sell violence to children? Not the manufactured family man who probably hasn't had a genuine emotion in decades? I'm the problem? Violence and a 5. R Eva. Into live. Violence. R. Yes, Vin roared, his own composure finally breaking completely. You and everyone like you who can't stand to see someone succeed without trying to drag them down to your level. You've turned what should have been a simple conversation about my work into a character assassination because it makes you feel better about your own failures. The word failures hung in the air like a death sentence. Joy's entire body went rigid, and for a moment she seemed incapable of speech. When she finally found her voice, it was barely above a whisper, but it carried more venom than all her previous screaming. Get out, she said quietly, her voice trembling with barely contained rage. Get out of my studio right now, before I say something that gets me fired and you sued. Vin stared at her for a long moment, clearly debating whether to escalate further or accept the dismissal. The tension in the studio was so thick it was almost suffocating. Finally, he straightened his jacket and looked directly into the camera. Ladies and gentlemen, I came here today to talk about my new film and share some stories with you. Instead, I've been subjected to a personal attack by someone who seems more interested in creating controversy than having an actual conversation. I'm sorry you had to witness this, and I hope you understand that this behavior doesn't represent the values that The View usually stands for. The dignified response only seemed to enrage Joy further. Don't you dare apologize for me, she screamed, completely losing control. And don't you dare pretend like you're taking the high road after sitting there insulting everything I've worked for my entire career. Vin turned back to face her one final time, his voice calm, but filled with disappointment. The only person who insulted your career today was you, Joy. I hope you get the help you need. With that, he turned and walked off the set, leaving Joy standing alone, trembling with rage as the cameras continued to roll. For several seconds, Joy stood frozen, watching Vin's retreating figure. Then, as the full weight of what had just happened hit her, she seemed to crumble. Her shoulders sagged, her hands dropped to her sides, and she looked around the studio with the expression of someone who had just realized they'd gone too far. "Cut to commercial," she said quietly, her voice barely audible. When the cameras kept rolling, she looked directly at the control room and screamed, "I said cut to commercial. Stop the show. Stop everything." The red recording lights finally went dark, as producers scrambled to figure out how to handle the biggest on-air meltdown in the show's history. Joy slumped back into her chair, the reality of her public breakdown beginning to sink in as crew members whispered among themselves and the studio audience sat in stunned silence. What you've just witnessed was one of the most shocking confrontations in daytime television history. A routine celebrity interview that spiraled completely out of control, revealing the ugly side of entertainment industry politics and personal vendettas.